So Krystle, following up on our last video, and noticing the differences in how luxury buyers are reacting to the current market versus, how a lot of the other buyers are kind of just frozen with uncertainty. Do you want to touch on, the bigger, more obvious factors that are causing this?
Well, I think one of them is interest rates. We've seen, they're still close to 7 for most buyers, or maybe even above. And that really affects the monthly payment. So if you're already tight with your budget, then how can you stretch for that next payment on a mortgage? And that makes it difficult for many buyers. And so they're kind of waiting, I think, on the sidelines with that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then inflation in general with the cost of goods and to feed your family and gas and all of those things just kind of plays a factor when your budget is tight and you don't have an investment account to help support you in making that next step up.
Right. So we focused on kind of the reasons some people are frozen, but maybe we want to understand what the luxury buyers understand or how they react because their circumstances are different. And so, if they're not tied to interest rates as much, right, they can just move assets around. They have balances of their assets, right, between stocks, bonds, businesses, and, they're probably more making a lifestyle decision rather than a life circumstance decision.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. They, they're able to make that decision when in reality, there's some solutions for that lower income buyer as well, to kind of work around that so that they're not so tied to that interest rate. But I think some of them are still scared because they see the headlines of, houses aren't moving and they're sitting on the market for a long time and inventory is growing. Mm-hmm. What have you heard from some of your buyers?
Well, buyers are asking us all these same things. Oh, is the market really slow? Are people buying homes right now? And if you really just focus more on the data, like I think the luxury sector does, they're looking at what is actually happening, strictly from a data standpoint and not letting the headlines affect them as much. They make better decisions because they're not so focused on the headlines. So when we look at the data, homes are still moving. Even if in Phoenix, which is a much bigger market to point to, only a couple hours away from our areas, has 27,000 homes actively available. But if 5,000 of them move every month, right, which is slower than it was a month ago or a year ago, then that's still a reasonable amount of inventory, right? And I think it's recency bias too. We got so used to having low inventory and high demand. Now we're in a position where the studies are showing us that there are more sellers than buyers in the market. And the pendulum swing is drastic because of the difference of where we're coming from. Right? If we took out the last 5 years and just went from 2018 or 2019 to today, then the market would just be totally wonderful, leveled out, maybe still be a little bit more of a seller's market because we don't have that recency bias. And but the big challenge again comes back to the difference of those times and now is the interest rates are 3% higher. If the luxury buyers are more likely to pay cash, right? That 1 to 3% interest rate is going to be much less important to them. And so they might actually see it as an opportunity and go, oh, wow, well, now I have more choices of homes to pick from. I have less competition, right? I might actually have a lot more bargaining power because the headlines are telling people that,
Right.
That it's a buyer's market, right? So we just had a client, negotiate literally 10% off a purchase price of a home that was priced pretty reasonably. And I thought, that's so unlikely to happen, right? But it worked. And so, we support our clients, strategies they want to take and help them pursue those. And sometimes that results in 5%. We just had one of our listings under contract at 5% below list price, you know. But then again, if you kind of go back to what is the overall market and you look at the last 30 days of sold price versus list price, 97.5%. That's not that different from a year ago.
It's not. And I looked at even the luxury specific statistics, and it was about 97.5 last year of the sold price versus the list price, and now it's only 96.94. So that, maybe a 0.5 percentage difference really isn't making a hit on the price. It's not matching what the headlines are saying, that we're headed for a downturn.
Right. Clearly inflation is the top of everybody's minds, right? We can look at jobs reports and talk about tariffs and put the focus on some things that I think have some correlation, but more importantly, I think people feel the inflation when they're in that lower to middle income price bracket. And so when you go into the grocery store, and eggs are $7 a dozen, right, and butter's $8 a pound, and it's just like, wait, that's triple what it was a few years ago, right? That's a shocking thing, right? Or you go out to eat and you're like, wow, I'm now sticker shocked by just going out to it could be a very modest place to eat, right? And in Flagstaff, we have a Flagstaff tax at some of our restaurants that everybody loves, right?
Yeah.
And a high minimum wage, so people are feeling that inflationary impact, and it's very real, right? When we are, our home budget, right, the cost that we can afford to support our families, is so different than it was a few years ago. So it makes sense to some extent, right, why people are scared or waiting for some stability to act. But again, I think coming back to the opportunity that some other buyers are seeing when they're not restrained as much, or they can move assets around to help try to protect themselves, right? They say, maybe it's not the time to have bonds, right? It's a bad bond market.
Yeah, it is actually.
So what's the most stable place I can put my money? Right. I've always wanted that third home. Must be nice, right? So I think that is, that's an interesting thing. But I do see that where, even though on average homes are still selling very close to list price, I still think there's definitely more opportunity finally to get a good deal out there.
Yeah. If for nothing else, there's more inventory. So we're more of a balanced market instead of this crazy home goes on the market and 2 minutes later it's gone, with 5 offers. So it feels really weird. And I do tell clients that, it's different than that recency perspective that we've had. But it's really cool because we can stop for a moment and think and find that opportunity. And then for those buyers that are struggling to make that change that they want to, there's opportunity there too to have some creative thinking and, for agents that are willing to stick with them, encourage them, and find different ways to lower their rate by a buy down, or maybe, do a DSCR loan on a multifamily home. You just had one go under contract, I think.
Yep.
Maybe they're living in one unit and they're renting out the other. That's a way to make it work, to take the opportunity now before prices do come up, because when everyone jumps back in and the rates are 5 and 6% again, the prices are going to go up.
Yeah. I think if tariff conversation continues and we're seeing that affect everything that we are consuming, right? Because you can, leaving politics out of it, it's a tax on people purchasing goods.
Right.
Right? Like if I go buy something, it costs more because there was an added tax to the good at some place in the chain, right?
Yep.
So that also, right, adds into housing, right? Whether we want it to or not, right? Incomes have to be raised from employers. Houses go up to balance what everything else is doing. It's the hedge against the inflation.
Yeah.
So people with more understanding of economic conditions are probably more opportunistic or more positive in their thinking about making a purchase now before the houses cost even more. I think the unfortunate side of it is that I think if this does continue, right, over the next couple of years, which it very well could continue before things get better or balance a little bit better, then the American dream is just becoming more unachievable, right? If you don't get in to start, then it's harder to have that home to step up into the home you really want.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe I settle and I'm like, okay, I'll get a 2-bedroom condo today for my family of 4. Right. But what I really want is that 4-bedroom
Right.
in the neighborhood that I prefer. If I don't ever get the 2-bedroom condo, well, then it's going to continue being harder and harder to get that 4-bedroom home with the white picket fence that we like to imagine.
And it's exponentially harder. It's not like you're following this curve. It gets exponentially harder.
Right. Do you feel like people, like the longer they rent, right, the more that trend or that mindset of renting continues, right? The more okay you are continuing to rent rather than trying to make that uncomfortable jump.
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking with a client friend of mine, and long time renter, right? Single income, makes good money, but going and doubling his monthly housing cost to own rather than rent.
Right.
It's literally double. And it's not always going to be that way, right? Eventually, like the rent values are going to continue on an upward curve faster than the home values. And then, it might feel better to transition from a high cost rental to a high cost monthly payment. But just that difference, right? That currently between where he's comfortable and he's able to put a little money away and save it for maybe the house in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I'm like, well, what if the home prices go up 10% and you waited until you had, more money down to keep your payment lower. But if home prices go up, right now you're financing more. So maybe the payment's the same, but now you're having a larger principal to pay down in the long run.
And you lost out on that equity you were putting towards the house for that year or 2 years that you were just throwing away with rent.
Right.
So that's where the exponential difference comes into place.
Yeah. I think that while everybody else may be sitting on the sidelines in fear, right, make the uncomfortable jump now, get into that first home or get into the neighborhood that you've wanted to, right, when there's less competition for the ideal house and the ideal location next to the school, et cetera, right? Just look at it more as an opportunity. But also, I think what you pointed out, Krystle, that was really good is that's also where our strengths come in, right? Our strengths as professionals in, the real estate business, helping buyers and sellers directly, whether it's a realtor or a lender, figuring out the creative way to make it work for your financial situation.
So, David, what I think I hear you say is that there are some real challenges for many buyers, but there's some real opportunity in the market.
Absolutely. And we're definitely here to help the luxury buyers that are in a position that want to go and diversify or move assets around or make a lifestyle, decision. But for the buyers that are, just trying to get in the market or just trying to make, a decision because of a life circumstance, like their family's growing, that's where we come in.
And that's what we're here for, right? That's what we love to do, is to be creative, find those solutions, work with a lender that knows how to get there, because it's not just us doing it for our buyers. It's going to be a team effort in this kind of market and all the factors that affect it. So our luxury buyers know that there's opportunity, and what we want to show everyone else is that there is. and help them find the way to get there. You know, keep an eye on that luxury number, because that's really what dictates, I think, the rest of the Flagstaff market.
Right. And the data over the headlines.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks.